talk to you about pattern-based text. And I feel exceptionally grateful to Diane, who came up here and said, is it okay to swear? And then to Hayden, who proved that it's okay to swear. My swears come naturally. Part of my upbringing was in New York, so we'll just see. Yeah, we'll just see what happens. We're in it together. So as Michelle already introduced me, my name is Torrey Podmajersky. I wrote strategic writing for UX. And I really have yet to figure out how to introduce myself using the phrase, you may know me from, but set that as a personal goal. Okay, I work currently as a consultant, consulting with teams to build design systems or build content into their design systems, also solving content design problems and user experience problems with content. So, you, like me, may have this kind of memory in your personal scrapbook. And maybe you're the designer over here, and you're working with your PM who owns the project that you're working on. And you've both been aligned for quite some time on what needs to happen, and they're confident that it'll meet the needs of the business. You've worked really hard on it, they've worked really hard on it, and this guy, that one guy, comes along. Maybe they are the highest paid person. Maybe they are the person in charge. Maybe they're just somebody who's hugely influential for reasons that go undetected in the ether. But they come in and they think, my opinion's better than your opinion. My opinion counts more. And they can mess it all up. And I come in when they have opinions about the text in the UX. Raise your hand if you have been in a meeting about designs and you spend the entire meeting on some text phrase. Yeah, we called that in my teams rat-holing. It's a particularly miserable phrase. So that one guy thinks, well, the text is just your opinion, and my opinion outweighs your opinion, so they mess up your whole scrapbook. That guy. So it ruins the usability, it ruins all these things. And what he says is something like, what happened to my text? It was very clear and I worked very hard on it. Now, imagine if you can come in and say, well, our pattern is this. We use verb the noun for maybe our titles, when the person can do something in the product. And you back that up with your rationale. Like, where, I can't see it with my timer here, but it says, when we lead with what they can do, we'll usually retain more users. And this is something we do when we leverage any part of the design system, right? We not only say that's the pattern, but we use the rationale behind it. Nod your head if you're like, yes, I totally do that all the time. Yeah, there's 3 people nodding their head. So, one of the things I want you to take away from this is that good UX text is not about your opinion. It's not just your opinion. Some opinion gets in there because text is complex. We can say so many things with it. I'm saying things with it right now. So, here's what we're going to talk about. Which content? Well, I'll give you a definition of UX content, and I'll talk with you about how text patterns can speed you up, and how maybe fights about the text slow you down, and what we can do about that. So, let's talk about this UX content. I define UX content as the content that lets people do what they're there to do. Very simple. Very simple, except let's map that onto what a business in general is trying to do. So in general, very generically, a company that makes a product or a service needs to attract customers, convert them or convince them to use the product or buy the product, needs to onboard the people into using it, needs to engage them while they use it. If things break, they need to support them, and hopefully they transform those people into people who come back and are attracted into maybe the next offering or into the next iteration, and maybe they bring their friends and colleagues and family, depending on the experience. Be weird to bring them all to like Visual Studio. So we have this general idea of what happens. That attract, convert, onboard is what the business is trying to do. But humans who are trying to decide whether or not to use this, they're investigating, they're verifying, they're committing, they're setting things up. They have a different perspective on this. And really, I want to illustrate the difference between investigate and attract here very simply. Have you ever been on a dating site? Hands? Been on it, not asking you to admit that you used it, right? You've been on it. There are some profiles that are written to be very attracty. Look how attracty I am. It is just fantastic. I am fantastic. And there are other people who understand who's going to be using the service. Oh, you want to find out about me? Well, I will, and you want to know these things about me, probably. So I'm going to tell you about those things. The content that's written in those different profiles, if it doesn't meet the person's need of investigating, it's not going to reach them. And that's true for any of the kind of content we make for a product. So when we are making content for this investigate or attract phase, it might be ads or product pages or tweets and posts. We still call them tweets, right? Okay. You might, when people are coming to the, like, I'm going to buy this product, I'm going to download that app, they want to see the reviews and the sales collateral, depending on what the kind of product is. Note that I'm not making like comprehensive lists of kinds of content here. These are just sort of ground them as examples. When people are setting up, they need the get started guides, they need first run information, they need all of this. They also need different content, some of the same overlapping how-to content when they go to use it. They might need troubleshooting content when something breaks. And then there's all the things we can do to help people prefer this and make it sticky, right? So please memorize this, and there'll be a quiz after lunch. Now, what I want to make the point is, when we are talking about content, we need to be specific about the kind of content that we're talking about, because product content is all of this. UX content, on the other hand, is really the lower half. UX content is the content of doing, okay? It's content for helping people do what they're in the experience to do. Now, did we all get that? Ready for your quiz? Okay. Let's talk about text patterns. Now, I'm going to show you a big list, but don't be frightened. I am actually going to show you all of these. What I want you to take away from the immense amount of detail that I'm about to show you is that, wait, there's just patterns? We can just do that? Yes, you do not need to memorize it right now. What I want to do is open up this world that I hear from people, they don't even know. Like, language works that way? Yes, okay. So let's talk about them. Here's a context title. Okay, its whole job is to clarify the context. The pattern here is just use the brand name or use the title of the content item. Like, if it has a name, use its name. Sweet. This is a screenshot from the Seek app, which can tell you the kinds of organisms you point the camera at. That is not a kangaroo in Washington State in my yard. So, context title. Very simple, right? And notice this pattern here under the patterns, it just puts in curly brackets, brand name. So I'm going to use this. Curly brackets just mean replace that with whatever you need. So a task title, and this is where we get into verb the noun. Sign in. It's a verb. It's a complex verb because English. Verb the noun. Well, this is using not the, but with, and with your, but sign in with your Cornell lab account. Cool. And you want to use the same verb that's in the button. Sign in, sign in. Makes it incredibly easy for people. And in research, using this kind of pattern where you just have that matchy-matchiness means that people more frequently hit the button correctly. It converts better. People move forward more easily and feel a higher sense of confidence. Super simple. The button itself, right? We just talked about this. You want to have that verb match. You might just say verb. You might say verb the noun. You might say verb now. Cool, right? In general, you want buttons to be like 1 word converts best in English, 2 words converts okay and like 1 word if it's 2 words that people usually see together. 3 words, you're getting into dangerous territory, and like 4 and more words are just fine, whatever. Sometimes it's the right choice, especially if you're still matching that verb and you're providing the right context. But this kind of pattern, instead of a hard word count, makes it so that people feel, designers feel, like I have the flexibility I need to get where I'm going with my specific design. Okay, menu items, very similarly, you want a group of items, nouns or verbs, that work as a set together. These are the menu items at the bottom of Sudoku. This is my favorite Sudoku app, by the way. Menu items can also be extreme, right? Maybe you need a whole taxonomy, like in Craigslist, of what all of these are and how they all work as a set, usually reflecting this mutually exclusive but collectively exhaustive, sometimes known as MECE, sense. Okay? Notice I've been skipping over the purpose of these because for titles and buttons and menu items, it's like, just let the person do the thing. Let the person know what they're doing. The purpose becomes more necessary to focus on soon. Why do we put descriptions in things? Well, we just heard from Hayden, stop putting those stupid question marks everywhere, right? Just put the content they need right on the page. Yes, right? Sometimes then you've got different audiences who need different things, not based on their disability, not based on their demographics, but based on how long have they been here? What do they already know? Do we need to differentiate our experience? But in general, we need to use descriptive text to set expectations, establish the brand. Every phrase that we use should be conveying our brand, should be recognizable. And we use them to reduce liability. Tell them what's going on. Now, I've got 3 patterns here that are really commonly used. To do X, verb the noun, right? Maybe that'll echo what's in the title. Maybe it'll be exactly what's in the title, and that just works for people. Maybe we tell them what it helps you do. Or maybe we tell them, if this other thing that you have no control over happens, then this other thing will happen. And we'll see this in just a moment. Okay? So, let's put it together. In this empty state, we are setting an expectation. If the person can take action, tell them what to do. Verb this noun. Sweet. Verb this noun to do X, do Y, give them a button to go do that action. If no action is available, like here in Reddit, you need other people to start chatting with you. That's out of your control, in the app at least. Go bug your friend. Then we might not even need a title. We would just say, if somebody messages you, if X happens, you'll see it here. Make sense? Okay. Notification. To do X, verb the noun, verbing the noun helps you do X. You see there's a lot of repetition here? These give you sentence starters. These give you ways and gives your product owner ways to start drafting that text in ways that will tend to work for humans. If you're designing in English, that is. Labels. You want to minimize the effort required. Maybe in your design system, you want to specify like, hey, we use verbs for this reason or nouns for this reason, but we want to tell you what we use. Transitions and confirmations. In English, we say, verbing the noun. You may or may not use ellipses at the end. And then you say, verbed the noun. You might even leave out a confirmation sentence, except for a screen reader, right? Because you would want to let people know that the state has changed when that happens. Inline errors. So, actually, let me go back to transitions and confirmations. I've included purposes with all of these, right? You want to confirm that an action is happening. You want to inform them or reassure them. These are all critical things. For errors, you always, always, always want to help people meet their goal, right? Sometimes you can't get them to their goal. For an inline error, you probably can. So you just say, verb the noun, enter the, select a title, enter your first name, enter your family name. Notice that all of these say please in front. Why? Right? So visually, it clutters it. Visually, it means that we have 4 extra words on the screen. Why would we put 4 extra words on the screen? Are there sometimes we should use please? Yes. Are there sometimes we should use sorry? Yes. Inline errors are rarely one of them. Okay. Sometimes it's not as easy as that. Sometimes you actually have to take them away from their experience and do something else. But your goal is still to help the user meet that goal. So you're going to tell them what to do. You're going to tell them what to do. You're going to say, verb the noun. Because of this problem, you need to do this. Maybe you would use one of the other patterns for description. Maybe you would just say, to do X, do Y. Maybe you can't even say what the problem is because it's so esoteric. And you just give them the verb. So this is not so much using errors as like oh, bad stuff happened, you should feel bad. This is using error messages as alternate UX that just gets them where they want to go without any sense of shame or discomfort, just moves it forward. Sometimes, though, we just need to help people meet their goal anyway, even though they're completely blocked where they are. The original error message I got here on all of us is at the bottom of the screen. And the title, and so I recommend here, lead with the title of just problem name. I'm giving you context for this. So this is a context title. And I'm going to say, because of this problem, you can't X until this Y happens. We good? So, was that too many patterns in 10 minutes? Okay, good. Now, let's talk about why these are handy. Specifically, not just the patterns, but the rationale behind them, that all you're doing is trying to move people forward. You're trying to use extremely usable content as a first starting place to get there. Why does that help? Because fights have slowed you down. So as we all know, this is the design process. You start at one end, you design it, there is a review, and then you hand it off. And the handoff takes some time, but then you're done, right? No, you're definitely not done. Instead, in my experience, it looks more like this. You do some design work, you do some review work, you do some design work, you do some review work. And then you hand off, and then it's really also not done. Something else comes up, and you do that, right? And that handoff is still a big chunk of time because you've got to package it up, you've got to communicate it, you've got to document it, you've got to do the other. Anyway, you get the idea. So, we can just use ChatGPT, right? And we can shorten our initial design because ChatGPT gives it all to us. Maybe not our whole designs, maybe just the text. I hear this a lot. Well, we can use ChatGPT for all our text now. So it really speeds us up. Great. I guess. But is it really helping you here? Do you know why that text is better? Do you know, does it feel better? Are you still with that one guy who has an opinion that outweighs yours and definitely outweighs ChatGPT's? So the problem here is not just the length of that initial design time. The problem is also, you do save a little bit of time there. But imagine if you used essentially these patterns as documentation embedded into your components that drastically shortened writing your initial text, at least, for your designs. I'm not saying that you wouldn't change it from there. In general, people start with patterns like this as a like, hey, we know it'll be usable. Can it be better? Can it be more brand aware? Can it be more sensitive to tone or context or emotion? Yes, probably. As a starting place, it can really shorten that. But the real improvement here is in shortening the review cycles just a little bit. When you shorten those review cycles, instead of rat-holing on the content in those meetings, and you say, yes, we started with this pattern, it works really well for this, we've been able to have good content in user testing from the beginning, and people pointed out in user testing that they really felt like they understood it, that they're confident they know what to do. Fan-freaking-tastic. That one guy doesn't stand a chance. And it saves a huge amount more money using that time is money equation, I'm guessing. It's extremely hard to measure, but that's what we have these other talks for. So I advocate that we use these patterns, not just text patterns, but design patterns in general, to save time not only in our designs, but in our review. So we have talked about content being necessary, text patterns speeding you up, and fights slowing you down. Does everybody else love Chippy as much as I do? So Chippy asks, but how? Really, how would this even work? Well, when we include content in our design systems, we really think about patterns, principles, personality, and practicalities. I love a little alliteration. So, what I find to be extremely useful is in most of your design components, and I think even in the ones that Diane shared earlier from Tesco, you have something like this, right? Title, description goes here. Make sure you write a description. Primary button, secondary button. Sometimes secondary is just cancel, right? It's just written in there. But imagine if you brought your component in and it said things like verb the noun right in there, right? And then this weird thing happens. Do you know that most people like puzzles? Most people like puzzles. Mad Libs is one of the goofiest puzzles we can play, right? And what this is asking you to do is fill in some words. Oh, okay, so I got to start with a verb. What's the right verb for this? Great, so you're already thinking around the right lines. Instead, it's not a blank page problem. It's not, where do I go from here? It's, if you write this in, it's not there anymore. If you write this in, you will already have something usable that you can iterate on. Cool? And look at that laundry list when you can see it. It gives you that consistency of text from the beginning. It gives you readability and grammar. You can accelerate this text creation, and you've got your punctuation and capitalization built right in. Nice. So, principles. These are principles from, does it say Zendesk at the bottom? Yes. These are principles about the content itself. The text also needs to adhere to the rest of your product principles, the rest of your design principles. But there are things specific to the content that can go right into your documentation, so that when you are in the room with that one guy, You can be like, actually, we're using the active voice here because that's part of what we're doing, because it's simpler and shorter, right? And we want simple and short because that adheres to our guidelines from user research, from wherever it is, right? So we can give that advice at the principal level. We also want personality. Like this one is from Duolingo. The voice qualities that you want to appear in there carry your brand. What you talk about, every sentence that you use, every phrase should be like, oh yeah, that's the Tesco way of doing it. Should be immediately different from, give me another UK supermarket brand. Sainsbury's. You should know when you're on a Tesco page versus a Sainsbury's page from the content, right? Not just the brand colors. In fiction writing, there's actually an axiom that every time you're writing dialogue, you shouldn't need to say who's saying it, right? That piece of dialogue could only come from this character at this moment. That is a really high bar to reach in UX content, but it's a good one to try for. So, you also need a ton of practicalities, right? How does your product handle abbreviations? Have you internalized that guidance personally? Do you absolutely know? One person. Rarely, okay, yes, Rarely does too. How about numbers? Do you know how you handle numbers? Do you always spell them out? What kind of decimal place do you use? How many digits do you decimalize to? You could write all of that down, right? All of these practicalities make your product a more seamless whole, even when there's hundreds of thousands of people working on making that product exist. So, I help people do this. That's the whole point of the slide. And that is it for me. Thank you very much. Wait, I have a question. How do I deal with politics and pragmatism? Politics over pragmatism. You're talking about that one guy. Yeah. What I do is I go and talk to that one guy separately. And if I suspect that he's going to be a problem before the meeting or before the review, I go to him early. Sometimes I go to him at the beginning of the product or the project, and I say, so, tell me what your main concerns are. What do you think needs to be the most clear here? And I involve them in the co-creation process from the beginning. And I listen and I nod, and I can quickly tell, are my patterns going to work for this? Are we going to be able to go through a design process? Or are there really new things and new considerations, like brand new regulations about something that we are going to have to talk about an awful lot for people to understand? Like sometimes that one guy has a really good point. So I need to go be curious as early as possible, so that when it comes around time to do the thing, it not only fits the consistency patterns and fits into the style, but that guy thinks it's all his idea. Any other questions? Yes? Yeah, there's a great question about multiple languages. How do we, when we're designing in multiple languages or across multiple languages, how do we ensure that we keep it consistent across that? So for a wildly worldwide product, and please note, all of these patterns were in English, and they do not directly translate into every single language. When it is really important to be in those patterns in English, then it's also important to be consistent and concise and all of those things in other languages. So working with people who own that language, whether they are in-house content designers working in multiple languages, or it's being sent out for translation, making sure that they have guidance to do that and maintaining that guidance across. And honestly, somebody who is not an expert in that language, and let's kill this whole like native language speaker thing right now, but if they are not an expert in that language, their opinion does not count about that language. Yeah, so the question is, in France we say UX writing, and is there a difference between UX content and UX writing? Let me add another one, which is content design. Content design is another synonymous term. So yeah, like it's extremely contextual, and the content people have done this to themselves. We've given ourselves lots of names. Yeah, so if, you can always go deeper and be like, are you talking about just writing words in screens? Or are you talking about the strategy behind that? Are you talking about designing within design systems or even with your design partners? And whatever their title is, whatever we're calling it that day, just nod and be like, oh yeah, new discipline. Doesn't that suck? Naming is hard. Thanks for the question.
I think we have time for like one more question.
One more question? Yes. Yeah, so the question is, if you're at a company that doesn't have a lot of UX content experience, how would you start? And let me just get a pulse. Raise your hand if you're like, content, we don't really have expertise in that. Yeah. Okay, so at least a quarter of the room, maybe a little bit more. What if you, raise your hand on the other side, you have content design and they're well established and everybody knows who they are. Nice. Maybe a quarter to a third. And then everybody in the middle is like, oh. So how to get started is, my business coach says that this is the moment that I say, you hire a consultant. However, you hire a consultant when you know the difference you want them to make, right? If there are pain points in your company about how support calls are too high for things that aren't broken, it's just people don't understand it, you might have a content problem. If you have problems where people think that your product is being made by, like they don't even recognize that one part of your product is related to another part of your product, content is part of your problem, right? If you have terminology problems where people, maybe your customers call features or actions different names than your engineers internally call them, and that's different than your C-suite calls them, you have a content problem. But it might not be measurable until you can figure it out and be like, oh, we should measure that. Is the content a problem? We've just heard about how the documentation layer, the explanation in our design systems is critical to its adoption. Did you know that that is UX content? Because your design system is a product, right? It's an internal product. It may or may not have code backing it up, but your design system is a product. How your design system is used is documented not only in the very valuable technical documentation, but in the labels of your tokens, in the words, like we were talking about, in the descriptions, in the UI text components themselves. So, you all want more content design in your world now, don't you? Yes, okay, that was the goal. I've done my job. Thank you very much, everybody.